Hey, everybody, it's Denise Siegel, and I want to go ahead and do a little bit of catching up on some reality that kind of corresponds to the dreams I've had. So you'll remember that I talked about this in the last couple of weeks, the dream I had back in March of 2021, just maybe not even a month into the Biden administration, that I was in this facility with all these people being shot and killed that were people on the left, Democrats, whatever. And I, made my way out, and the choices were either be killed or go to this prison. And so I've talked about that numerous times. Um, Now we've seen that there has been a for sure uh, move to, you know, intimidate people by the Trump administration, sending troops to cities. They can't do much because of the laws, but there's a very bad and scary development in that front that I need to report to you guys now because it is a real thing, and it is something that can take this to the next level, which just came out not long ago. So there's a thing, we know about executive orders, and we've heard a lot about that because really in the last, I don't know, 20 years, that has become more of a feature of the executive branch, uh, sort of deciding that they're just going to kind of rule by fiat. And Trump has really gone crazy with that. I think the number of executive orders are out of totally insane, and people have been paying attention to those. However, there's something more sinister afoot, and it's called the National Security Presidential Memo that just got put out. And the abbreviation is NSPM. And this particular one is NSPM 7. I'm going to put a link to it on my Substack. So if you're watching this on Substack, I'll probably put it on the YouTube as well. This is it's not an executive order. And so it's kind of flown under the radar. Now, of the 7 of these memos, they are basically directing I had to take notes because I don't want to screw it up. The Joint Terrorism Task Force, the JTTF, they are tapping this post 9/11 task force on domestic terrorism and terrorism in general to basically, what Trump is doing, he's saying, here, you guys who are basically federalized police, people that report directly to the federal government, they are interwoven, it sounds like, within the police department, local police. And, you know, I don't know honestly, I don't know all of the ins and outs of it, except for that, from what I've heard, there's about 4,000 of them. And this is something that can always pump more money into. But this removes all of the obstacles for Trump, like posse comitatus, where he can't deploy the military and have them do anything against the citizens or even really do law enforcement. He can just have them standing around. So they've been, cleaning up and picking up trash and stuff like that. So this removed that obstacle. There are 7 of these orders, and the 6th one, for whatever reason, is classified. So we don't know what that says. But he has openly put out this one, where if you read it, the other ones are, I think, open. And I read some of it. I'm going to go more in depth with it. But basically, what it does is it's a memorandum saying that they're going to go after basically anybody who they deem anti-American, anti-Christian, anti-family values. And the way it is being read is basically anyone who is not, MAGA. And basically everyone, like Democrats, what I've been saying since 2020. So this, while it may not be something that can stand up in a court of law at this point, for example, they might investigate you to, because oh yeah, and it's also like, like they don't like the new age people or anybody who's not a Christian. So say you watch, you're somebody who is at a protest and or you're in the, your neighbor thinks you're a weirdo and reports you. I don't know how it's going to work, but let's just say give some examples. Or, you know, um, hmm, you speak out online, you say something on your Twitter. So it's meant to cool speech and to try to get people to stop talking um, about this administration in any kind of critical way. So say you do any of that. Well, they can't really arrest you for that, but they can say that you're anti-American and that you're supporting terrorism. So they start an investigation against you. Now they can't really charge you with that in a legal sense. Like they take you to the judge. There's rules and laws about that. So in the process of investigating you, they just upend your life and ruin your life, basically put you in a situation where you have to pay for all these criminal attorney fees and you're being harassed. And maybe they find something, maybe they find that you know, um, you made a mistake in your taxes, or maybe they find that you know, mm, have an unpaid, I don't know, who knows what they could find, but most people probably not much. Um, mm, and they just basically harass you into compliance. Now, to me, this is like just a first step, right? Because the dream could have been a metaphor for just this harassment aspect. But um, if this is allowed to continue and people participate in this is going to get, of course, worse and worse. Now, I had yesterday in meditation, we did a meditation, and I was trying to look ahead and see what was coming for the US. The last time I did it, it was more worldwide and it was a lot clearer what was going to happen with that. This was like tuning into a gnat with dementia. There was just so many different fractured things. And I wasn't the only one. The other psychics had that same experience. One of the things that was clear, they were metaphorical, was I saw a sealing of the blue states and also trying to divide them. So potentially there may be a plan in place to sort of isolate people in the blue states and divide them. And that sounds a little bit like what this is. Um, Here's the thing that is very worrisome to me is Trump obviously is in severe mental decline. And we can tell that by his speech to all the higher leadership in the military. He's incapable of kind of forming a sentence or being coherent at this point. It makes Joe Biden, when during that debacle of a debate, look cogent and actually seem not so bad, because at least Joe Biden isn't a malignant narcissist on top of everything. But we have this man who seems extraordinarily confused. And like I said, I was trying to tune into the future regarding leadership here and what was going to happen, it was like a fractured, everything was fractured and just all over the place and impossible to really kind of get a hold on. As a psychic or somebody who can tune into people and future events, the reason you can tune into future events, in my opinion, is because there is sort of a plan in play. Like there is a tactical kind of, some kind of, you know, idea that is a underlying kind of, you know, way of thinking. There is some kind of plan in place of like, well, this is logical next steps. Person has a certain personality type. So, for example, like with Putin, not hard to tune into what's going to happen because he's cohesive. His mind works properly. He's got a certain agenda and it's in his auric field. It's sort of imbued into his will and how he's going to go about things next. With Trump, he already is born on an eclipse with a Uranus conjunction on his sun and opposing his moon. So he's already naturally very erratic and kind of all over the place. And now you also have the fact that he's got like escalating dementia, which makes it very fragmented and fractured and really scary to me because of all the people in the Trump administration. And he's also said openly he hates his enemies and he wants to destroy them and everything. So anybody that doesn't agree with him, including people that are close to him, all end up kind of thrown in a garbage can somewhere along the way. Think about all the people that served with him in the first administration, that were his lawyers, they all ended up losing their licenses. Many of the people that were around him ended up in jail. He pardoned them, but their lives were basically ruined. And yet we have this whole new cadre of people around him who are facilitating his every whim and will. Now, the thing that's scary to me is Trump, because he's more interested in just sort of lining his pockets, and that was always his MO. Now that he's fragmented, and one of the things that happens with dementia is people get very paranoid, they have hallucinations, they often get really angry, they get uh, more irritable, and they become, unfortunately, often they can become worse versions of themselves. It's sort of like the mask is let go, and people tend to get, you know, there's a lot of negative emotions buried underneath that kind of start to come through. And I think we're seeing that with Trump. So he surrounded himself with people that are very much psychopaths, like Stephen Miller, Hegseth, all these people that are around him who basically are maybe even, I would argue, potentially more dangerous than even Trump, because Trump is very self centered. And if he can get what he wants and he's flattered and he feels important and he, lines his pockets and all that, you can kind of satiate some of his behavior. These other people are more ideological and a lot darker. And with Trump being so scattered, he'd be easily manipulated to do things that maybe in his first administration he would be less inclined to do because he wouldn't want the pushback because he wants to be loved. He cares to some degree that people like him. He doesn't seem to care anymore about that. And that's one of the things that sort of I've noticed with some people with dementia. That sort of, they become much more um, unaware of other people's feelings. So whatever natural narcissism and malignant narcissism he has is sort of, whatever part of him that was needing approval kind of dies. And sometimes I've seen that happen in other people who are not just going through the dementia phase, but who also have personality disorders. It seems to break that one sort of part of humanity about them where they do kind of pull themselves back because they care about certain people. That seems to be gone, in my opinion, with Trump. And I did an aura portrait of Trump on my Substack before. I took one from 2020, which was only 5 years ago, and one now. And the amount of degradation is stark. So that is scary because you have these people who are not elected. And also, this is not the agenda that people voted for, but, people just didn't do their homework or didn't care. Um, and basically, and frankly, our democracy, the people who interact with it, a lot of people sort of, they have a very casual relationship with it, sort of like, in high school when, some kid comes, says, I'm going to vote for me. I'm going to make sure all the lunches, we have pizza every day. And people vote for that, even though it's not possible. It's sort of like that. That's sort of how some people, it seems like, make their decisions based on, well, I like that guy. He's saying things I like. I'm not going to go any deeper. Just even if it's totally ridiculous, I'm going to vote for that person. And I think we had some of that. But I also think the election was stolen. And I really do. And there is some, I think, more evidence coming out about that. I haven't investigated that, but I'm fairly certain. So I had a dream, which I talked about on Substack a little bit the other day, about being in a room with Kamala Harris, and seeing this kind of absolute intense decline of Trump and asking people who were in his staff and people that were supposed to serve with him, who's going to take over now? Like, what's going on here? And couldn't get an answer. It was like just ignored. And I think that is happening. So we have this conflagration of a lot of very strange, or confluence of a lot of different strange things here that are really troubling. The other thing I want to say is I have a mother who is a malignant narcissist, and I know that personality type. Um, People with that personality disorder, they get off on hurting other people. They find it amusing and hilarious. It's their entertainment to kind of screw with other people. And we're seeing this come out now where this is the intention, to screw with people, to ruin people's lives. We've seen it across the board now with people he perceives as his major enemies, but this is going to filter down into the regular public, and that's what this directive is all about. So this is scary, and I don't know what the antidote to this is, other than, the purpose of this is to get people to just comply. And I think the other thing I want to say here is, I think that we are going to see this is why I've been saying for a long time that I feel like this is going, to get more and more extreme as time goes on. And part of this is the culture that we live in, the fact that 70% of the people in this country do not share the values of this small minority of people who want to impose this Christian nationalist agenda on everyone into compliance. And the reality is, this is not a slow, people say, oh, it's like the boiling frog. Well, yeah, but you can't change people's values in a matter of a year or 8 months or 5 years. People's values are deeply held. And in order to change people's values, it takes generations. That's why in what happened to the Native Americans, we murdered them. And then someone got the idea from the Christian church, the Catholic Church, which did this en masse across Europe. You can't, make people believe. You have to indoctrinate them at a young age. And it takes often, serious indoctrination. And it takes, generations to kind of weed out the culture. So in the case of the Native Americans, they were slaughtered, and then as they were broken nations, they took the children and they put them in uh, boarding schools that were Catholic boarding schools and indoctrinated them into Christianity. When those kids came back into those communities, they were changed. They were now Christianized, and basically that happened over generations. And now, if you go to a lot of Native American people, voted for Trump because they are evangelical, they're Christian, and their old ways have been broken, and their heritage has been broken, and they now, are indoctrinated into this way of thinking. That didn't happen in a couple years. That happened over generations. That's what the Catholic Church did in Europe. Um, the Roman Catholic Church, they went and, like the Teutonic Germans, they fought wars and wars and wars with them. And then finally, they took some of their old gods, made them saints. Some of them migrated because it was easier, and they just kept their value system. And eventually their children and their children's children became more and more indoctrinated into that belief system. And those they couldn't convert, they killed. And that's the history of imperialism. And changing a value structure, it doesn't happen over a short period of time. So what am I saying? I'm saying that basically, you know, you can't change people's deeply held beliefs in a year or two. So you're going to force people to um, into compliance, and that's going to cause resentment. you're going in and you're attacking people, you're pushing governors and blue states, and you're trying to like mess with them. You're basically, bullying the American people into making, complying with your desire to be a king and all of your value system, which I don't think Trump has that value system, but the people around him use that value system to try to get compliance with that minority of people who, at least there's more of them than there are, there's a buy-in from like 20, 30% of the population, and that's some kind of foothold. So what I'm saying here is this is a recipe in a country with 400 million guns to 500 million guns, so we don't even know how many guns, but at least that many, and uh, a really deep-seated, rooted feeling of freedom. The people came here for those reasons. We have a government set up for generations now to protect free speech, and people are not used to and don't really understand what's going on yet. And you're going to basically bully them and bully them. And what happens with a bully is, you know, there's two ways that what happens. Like people who are being bullied, they may put up with it for a while. They put up with it, they put up with it, they comply, they give their lunch money. They, eventually though, what happens is the bully just is never satisfied and is constantly, it gets worse and worse and worse until the person who's being bullied freaks out and punches the bully in the face or tries to kill them or whatever, goes crazy. And what I'm seeing here is this is where we are headed. We will get buy-in and compliance with a certain part of the population, but the 70% of the population who feels bullied and constantly cowed and feels oppressed, some people will flee this country. Some people will try to don't have that choice. And eventually, you're guaranteeing some kind of resistance to come into play. And here's the thing. Not only do we have that going on, we have the worst income inequality in this country, I think, ever, which is already a recipe, which is already why we have this extremism on the right and the left, which is why we had two choices to change our kind of trajectory. We had Bernie, who was representing the sort of FDR style fix and cure, which would have, I think, been a much better way to go, where people feel there's massive income inequality. This almost happened, this revolutionary kind of thing, this whole radical thing that we're in the middle of, almost happened back in the 30s. And FDR saw the writing on the wall. There was building and building of, the labor movement and people being really upset with the income inequality and people starving. And he decided to do the right thing and build these social programs to help people get out of poverty. And the extreme plutocracy, the oligarchy, the really wealthy people didn't like it. And over the course of subsequent years, they have built systems to sort of dismantle all of that. And now we're in a position where we're very, we're in the same situation. There's very, very poor people who work 3, 4 jobs who can't, afford to live. And we've got this wealthy oligarchic class who is trying to break the backs of everyone. And people, this intense income inequality historically has always led to upheaval and problems that generally, we don't want to have to we don't want to have to see in this country. Now, the Democratic Party is complicit, I think, in not allowing that particular solution to go forward because they have buy-in with their donors. But now we're seeing under the Trump administration, he's going after the Democrats and he is trying to persecute them. He's put lawmakers, he's tried to, jail them. And he's, going after even Republicans who don't agree with him, like Comey. This is just the tip of the iceberg. And this memorandum basically tells us this isn't going to stop. And it's not going to just stop with the people at the top. Oh, little rhyme there. It's not going to stop with the people at the top. It's not going to stop with the Comeys and all of the people that, Jimmy Kimmel's and, uh, Stephen Colbert's. This is going to filter down into the everyday people. And that is the plan of this. This is exactly what that memorandum is talking about. So I will post that link so you can read it yourself. It's on the government website. I've also talked to people who work in different agencies, government agencies, and they are getting pushed to comply with this and sign on to these DEI things, not just on the federal level, but on the state level. This is a massive harassment campaign that is just in the very beginning stages. And it's very, very worrisome because it's not just the Democrats, it's people, even if you are maybe apolitical and you're an independent, um, maybe you don't like the Trump administration because of whatever reason, or maybe you're not a Christian, maybe you're a Muslim, maybe you're a Jew, maybe you're Hindu. I have to tell you, people, that I've done some research, a lot of research into this, into Christian nationalism and people that are these evangelicals. They consider everything else to be satanic. They consider any other belief system to be demonic. So if you're Tibetan Buddhist, hey, you're worshiping the devil according to them. If you're Hindu, you're not one of them. You're demonic. Their mentality is that there is only one way, and if you don't go their way, then you are evil. And that othering and that kind of extreme psychosis and having no respect for other people and their belief system is what we've seen in past times when the Christian mission, the sort of imperialism that I've talked about here, uh, really goes insane and tortures and murders people. Christianity has a history of being literally the most violent of all. And don't blame Jesus. It's not his fault. It is the imperialism that's built into that DNA that I've talked about here, comes from the Romans. And it's still, some people subscribe more to that than they do to the words of Jesus Christ. Now, Jesus Christ would be very, in my opinion, he would be very upset that people are using his name to do these horrible things. Let me just say that I can't remember now, but basically, there was a thought there that kind of just went poof. You know, this is, I think this very thing happened in Europe with Christianity, and Europe was left basically. If you've been to Europe since then, there are a lot of people are very secular, and I think a lot of it comes from having seen how aggressive and how violent this uh, religion is. Again, I want to change, I want to be very clear here because the actual spiritual teachings of Jesus have nothing to do with this. However, this is the religion has this imperialistic DNA and very violent DNA that is repeating thematically throughout the history of the Roman Catholic Church, which then broke off into all these variations of, after Martin Luther. And it's still, those ideas and hierarchies and principles are still built into every single iteration that I have seen. Now there may be groups that, I know there are Christian groups because there's also like the civil rights movement, which is in keeping with the message of Jesus. There are people that practice in the Christian faith who follow Jesus, who actually follow the words and deeds of Jesus. So I want to be very distinctive in that because there is a huge schism between what Jesus really said and did and what how it's been sort of utilized in the vast majority of that religious context. Um, so what am I saying here? I'm saying that how do we fight this? Um, you know, we can't allow them to cow us because by doing that, we're capitulating and it's only going to make this worse. So you have to be brave. You have to just sort of do your thing and continue on your way and make plans for your life and live your life. How long this is going to take before this other aspect gets rolled out. I don't think it's going to be that long. I have a feeling with all of this ice stuff going on and all of this buildup of these internal forces and all this money being given, we're talking maybe the next 6 months, maybe by next summer, we'll be seeing this escalate to this level where people, it's not just about immigration, it's actually about harassing citizens and people. Um, and I think that is going to be the next and most precarious period. Um, Astrologically, I want to say that again, we are literally right now and over this next few months in the exact place, the Neptune return, the 29 degrees of Pisces, right before it went into Aries for the final time, in the exact return of the last civil war. That only happens every several hundred years. And we are there now. We are in the Pluto return of our government and the setting up of our government. We're in the Uranus return of both World War II and the Civil War. And we are going to have a Uranus Mars conjunction, which was the spark that hit and started the Civil War next summer. So this is heating up fast. And let's not forget the rest of the world. This is also heating up. Um, for whatever is being said about peace in Israel, I have my doubts. And I want to clear up one more thing before I go. So 3i Atlas, which is this interstellar object, there's a lot of misinformation out there about it. And I just want to clear up some things. First of all, Avi Loeb, who is the Harvard professor who has put out there the possibility that it is maybe an interstellar some kind of interstellar traveling thing that is some kind of technology. He has never said it's aliens, but there's so many crazy things that people have sent me that are just completely off the wall, that are not accurate. Number one, he gives it on his scale a 4 out of 10. So he gives it a 40% chance of potentially being technological in origin. Oumuamua, he thought was probably a technological object because it was flat, it was spinning, it accelerated. There's a lot of strange things. Now, that's not saying that they're ships. And then you have somebody like Stephen Greer going around, who's thinks that he's extraordinarily arrogant and thinks that he knows everything about all of this, which he doesn't because no one does. And he's claiming that, there's no way this is an interstellar object because, they travel point to point. Okay, but there's multitudes of, you're talking about when I was a kid and reading astronomy books, I started reading astronomy books when I was 9 years old. I used to carry them around with me, and I read all about white dwarfs and supernovas and stars and how they're formed. Now that was a long time ago, and now I'm an astrologer, not an astronomer. I wanted to be an astronomer. I know that, at the time, the estimates were like there was something like 350 billion stars in our galaxy. There's estimates that there's more like 500 billion stars in our galaxy now. And around all of these stars, there are planets, which as a kid, that wasn't in my astronomy books, but of course, that just is logical. If we have it, why wouldn't everybody else? I mean, Why would one tree have leaves and no other tree have leaves? It doesn't make sense. It seems like that was the architecture of the universe, right? Well, we are finding there are tons and tons of planets, and many of them are in the Goldilocks zone, meaning they are perfect for sustaining carbon based life. It's not to say there isn't other life that we don't understand that hasn't developed because we don't know everything. So, the idea that you can say that just because you have experience with whatever interdimensional energies or whatever alien life has been in contact with us here on this planet has been going on for since the beginning. I really do think that's true, and I think that's a whole other discussion. Um, that is one thing. That doesn't mean it covers every single other type of life form that could potentially find us. And in my estimation, whatever this is, if it is technological in origin, which I'm not sure it is, it could just be a very strange interstellar object that we've never seen because it's coming from a completely different part of the universe. It's possible, right? Whatever, uh, you know, that doesn't mean that don't have emerging neighbors, like people like us who are maybe 100 years ahead of us. They maybe have gotten the idea that there's something here that they want to check out. They may have sent a probe. It doesn't have to be a mothership. It doesn't have to be the kind of technology we see with super advanced beings that have been here for a long time. And they might be just doing a drive through and trying to see if they can gather data. Like we sent out our probes into the universe and currently gathering data. Um, it doesn't have to be like it's not the same necessarily the same thing, and it doesn't mean that there's going to be ships coming everywhere or that we're having an invasion or anything crazy like that. I mean, that's everybody is just piling on and making this very nutty. um the other thing is, if you look at this from a totally spiritual messaging kind of way, uh, what does it mean to have something so unusual coming through our solar system, whether or not it is of origin from another group of people or whether it's just totally natural? It is very strange. And it tells us that it's breaking all the rules. It isn't fitting in any of our we don't know anything about, we've never seen anything like this. It's breaking a lot of rules. It doesn't mean it isn't natural. And even Avi Loeb is not claiming that it is for sure technological. It tells us that from an astrological perspective and a metaphorical perspective, spiritually, there are seven, not just that one, but there's 25B Swan, and there's another, several other. There's another one that's actually quite big, which I can't remember, that was just discovered a few weeks ago. That is also that we're probably going to see actually in a few weeks. Um, it's another comet that's large. And then there's several other comets. And there's also an asteroid called Apophis that's headed our way and may actually come very close to Earth. And potentially, if it were to fall off its trajectory, might hit us, but probably won't. It seems very unlikely that it will at this point. But we're talking about seven comets coming into our solar system, three of which are big enough that you could see them with binoculars or with the naked eye. One of them you could be able to see with the naked eye. That is highly unusual. And astrologically, if you look into the record of how the ancients and people who lived in harmony with nature saw comets, they saw them as being disruptive and portending very bad periods of time, of either birth changes, or wars, plagues, famines. They were always seen as being very, very bad and disruptive. They're not positive. And so the spin that some people are trying to put on it in the new age community, you can see the writing on the wall. It's what's coming isn't good. I mean, unless you are completely out of touch with reality, you can see that things are getting worse, not better. These comments are basically signs and symbols that things are getting more extreme and getting worse. Now, the fact that you got one that's so unusual and so unpredictable and is doing things we don't expect, I think mirrors what we see here going on in the United States and across the world, where old institutions are failing and things are going into unexpected directions. People don't know how to respond to it here. We've never had anything exactly like this happen here. Other countries that responded quickly to an authoritarian takeover, like Ukraine with the Velvet Revolution, they had just come out of an authoritarian regime. It wasn't that long after. They had it in living memory. We don't. And uh, people are very confused, and this is all very novel and strange. And that is what not that it describes 3i Atlas. Um, I find this to be a very strange thing that we're having this swarm of comets, and two of which are basically behind the sun at the same time. That's also highly strange. Um, I don't know that it necessarily means it's technological, but it certainly is a message. And you know, 7 is also a mystical number of completion. It's the number of God. It's also the number of the mystical. And 7 being a number of completion could also indicate that this is a period of massive change. And that at the end of this period of massive change, that we'll be at the end of one cycle and we'll have to be in the beginning of a new one, which I believe is the case. So that's my take on it. I think everybody needs to read this memorandum here. I'm going to put it in the, I'm going to put a link below to it, and you can do some more research and investigation into this. But it is, things are heating up. Um, so that is my, what do we do about it? I think we are going to have to start to figure out ways to communicate with one another and build bridges between ourselves and support one another. Not just pray, but also find ways to support one another. I think maybe the next step is going to be people finding other people in their community of like minds, banding together with them, pulling resources, and being aware that this kind of thing might be coming for people, and find ways to sort of pull resources to kind of combat this. That's the only thing I can think to do at this point. Um, so if somebody attacks one person in your group, they attack the whole group, and you pull your resources and defend each other. I don't know what else to do. And we can't stop being ourselves. That's not going to happen. And I think reality is that, I think a lot of people don't even know what's going on. They're really clueless about this. And for those people, this is going to hit them hard. And those people are probably the most vulnerable right now. So if you're staying aware of this, you're one step ahead. If you're not, this is going to be, it could be catastrophic for those people who don't know what's going on. And that's not even speaking about all the other things that I'm keeping my eye on, but I'm just going to leave it there for today. God bless you all. You're in my prayers. Do your spiritual work, and pay attention to what's going on in your dreams, your intuitions. Work on your own, really being in one and in sync with your intuition, because it will save you. Blessings to all of you. Take care.